Iniciamos la...
Con la tradición. 1, 2, 3.
Hola, ¿qué tal amigos? Bienvenidos a Science y Fierros, el podcast en donde hablaremos de entrenamiento, nutrición, bodybuilding, siempre desde una perspectiva crítica, integral y evolutiva. Yo soy San y estoy muy contenta el día de hoy de estar aquí con Laura Placeres. Hola Lau, ¿cómo estás? Antes de dar la sorpresa del podcast.
Hola Sam, muy bien, emocionada, no puedo creer el episodio que tendremos el día de hoy. Yo creo que hasta que pasen algunas horas o algunos días caeré en cuenta de lo que esto significa y bueno, sin más, pues me gustaría que nos presentaras a nuestro invitado de lujo, alguien que tanto tú y yo admiramos muchísimo y seguramente muchas de las personas que también nos escuchan.
Y bueno, para no hacerla más de emoción, el día de hoy tenemos un invitado especial, Alberto Núñez. Hola Alberto, ¿cómo estás? Atleta, físico-culturista, gran entrenador también, coach y pues preparador. ¿Cómo estás, Alberto? How are you today?
Good. I'm recovering from some intense cardio. I was out hiking in the mountains, so we're still trying to feel normal again. But great. Things have been really good of late.
Well, first, Alberto, I'm sure most of our audience will probably know who you are. But for those who don't know, how would you introduce yourself? Alberto Núñez.
Man, so I think very similar story to most people. Just a hobby, passion that I got a little carried away with. That it's a privilege and an honor that I guess it's what I do for a living now. But yeah, I think it was the one thing that when it came to life's pursuits required the least energy out of me. Like for me to spend all night just studying this was easy. Like I'd gladly tell my friends, no, I'm busy, so that I can stay up and, just nerd out on anything fitness and bodybuilding related. And I think that's highly important when, you pick your life's path. It's got to be something like that because you'll be excited about the work. Sometimes you don't even realize how much work you're doing because you enjoy it so much. So yeah, it was supposed to be a little summer fling at age 16. And many years later now, 24 years, I think later, it's my everyday. So it's still my day one love, my first love. And I love it just as much as the first day I set foot in the gym. And I'm glad that I get to help people get the most out of themselves and their journeys.
Thank you, Alberto. And Alberto, what role does the mental aspect play in bodybuilding, and how do you work on staying focused and determined?
Yeah, I think it almost doesn't matter what the work is, but you can see who you are at your core in anything you do. So whatever you're prone to do, like when it comes to your personal relationships, when it comes to work, whatever, that's probably what both helps you excel and also creates conflicts with bodybuilding. So to me, above anything else, bodybuilding has been a way of getting, like we talk about like uncovering fat to see muscles, but just as important is like uncovering things so that you can get to the root of who you are as a person. So that's what keeps me motivated, is that every year in some way, even now where progress is so slow, how much I learn about myself is just insane. And I need to discover more. I need to learn more about how to work with myself and control myself. And obviously the contest prep does that, but it expedites it. It's like it's a more intense version of that, getting to know yourself process. So that's what keeps me motivated, is just learning to work on myself, how to handle myself, and just maximize myself. That keeps me like going as if I was still a newbie who could gain 10 pounds of muscle in a year.
Yeah, and that's something we can tell from watching your training videos and your stories and the content that you produce. How much excitement do you get out from your training? I've heard you plenty of times saying that's the best part of your day, and that's something that's contagious to people. I would like to talk a little bit about your last contest prep. I think you and all the team 3DMJ are known not only for bringing the athletes to the best shape possible to the stage, but also, and more importantly, I think, for doing so in a manner that preserves health as much as possible, and not only physical health, but also mental health. But I think you took it a step further this last prep when you said, and you committed to the process to getting to that stage lean condition without tracking calories, tracking macros, tracking steps, and getting to a really good shape. You ended up fifth in worlds, which is pretty awesome. So I would like to know, what were the reasons behind this new approach you decided to take?
So I think over the years, I've been doing less and less tracking with athletes, actually, but usually athletes that are new to this, because while tracking calories or macros can get you to your goal, it's kind of an outside first transformation, and the inside can kind of remain the same. It's just being suppressed during the time of the diet. So the best transformations are kind of inside out, which means let's work on our core habits, basically. So every once in a while, get someone who I'm like, okay, like let me go over how you ate before there was nutritional interventions, and then compare it to like how far away is that from tracking metrics such as calories. And if it's too far away, it's like, you know what? Even if you adhere to this, there's a good chance that we will relapse at a certain point. So instead of doing that, what I'll do is I'll see where they're at, and I'll meet them somewhere that's close enough where there's about 90% chance that they'll be able to complete what is being asked from them from a habits perspective. And this is great because it rewires and it reprograms habits. Like I think all of us here at a certain point, like the way we eat now, we don't really think about it. You know, like when we were having breakfast in Mexico City, like all our plates look kind of similar, right? And we don't even think about it. It's not a whole lot of effort. This is just so embedded in us that it's like our adopted culture in a way. So that is my goal with people, is like, okay, let's rewire you inside out. And it seems pretty basic when I tell them that. It's like, hey, okay, we're going to work on like things like, hey, let's get our lean protein feedings. Tasks that I assign is things like, let's be mindful of how full we get, certain amounts of fruits and vegetables. Let's not combine like eating with like other experiences, things like that. And it's crazy how much weight they're able to keep off, and just how bad dietary habits kind of sneak up on you. Anyone who like maybe for breakfast the last 10 years, they've had a soda and a donut, that was a slow process to get there. So what we're doing is kind of taking advantage of that same pathway and trying to change habits so that it is now something that's more internalized. And if like life gets a little crazy, it's like, this is your safety net. It's like your baseline habits. And there'll always be some resistance because people are like, I came here so you can give me the magic numbers so I can do what I need to do. And this is where I sell them on the, like, you know what? This is basically all I do when I prep. It's like you take these very complex ideas and then you turn them into like their core fundamental pieces. And it's a very simple system. It's just my satiety index, obviously. Like for them, maybe I tell them aim for 6 to 7 out of 10. And for me, towards the end of a prep, it's probably like you're living at 4, you know? So it's basic stuff, really, you know? And it's basic stuff, but it shows you just how far the basics can like really take you.
Yeah, and it's crazy, but it's necessary. O sea, es importante cambiar, change de hábitos.
Mm-hmm.
¿Y has implementado estas estrategias, Alberto, para algún atleta que tengas, tanto en off-season, en context prep?
Sí. I have with obviously with the more general population, like it's actually easy for them, you know, like because it's almost welcome. They want the macros, but they really don't want the macros inside. But with my people who are more regimented, they came from a tracking background, it's a little bit harder to get them to hop on these type of systems because they don't trust themselves. And like that is the problem. It's like you should be able to trust yourself at this point. So I've yet to really do it with anyone during a contest prep, and that's because that's just my limitations as a coach at this point. I don't know how to get people there yet. I've done it with myself, but I don't know how to get people there yet. What I do during a contest prep with a lot of my more experienced athletes is like we do use things such as like caloric ranges that are so broad that I think most people would be like, hold up, how could it be like 1100 calories or 1400 calories? Like that makes no sense. And this is to kind of train them to like trust their intuition, to trust what they're seeing, what they're feeling, so that eventually, yeah, we can get to the point where like they have even more control. And I'm just kind of like the safety nets is like they do things like over time. You do want to make it so that your athletes are less reliant on you and they are able to trust that what they feel is going on, what they think is going on, is actually going on.
That's really impressive, and all the mental work that took you to make these decisions. I think having that or taking that stress out from having these external numbers, as you said, can end up making the end product a little bit better, because you know you have less stress, then the system being your body tends to work a little bit better, tends to be a little more predictive. And that's something that I heard you say plenty of times during your blogs of the contest prep. So yeah, I experiment with that this last fat loss phase that I did, and I want to give you full credit for that, because I used to be one of those people that wouldn't imagine myself without my fitness pal and my spreadsheet and all these metrics and numbers in there. But I was telling Sam prior we started recording how easy this fat loss phase went, and I'm sure contest prep is a different animal for sure, but as you said, you try something with yourself prior, taking that to your athletes. But I'm excited to see how you end up picking up these tools and giving them to them, and how then probably the natural bodybuilding world would evolve, you know. So the next question regarding that is, how do you see natural bodybuilding changing or evolving over the next, say, 5-10 years?
Man, that's interesting because, you know, I guess no one can really predict the future, but things do come in cycles, I think. That's the best thing we can do. It's like, if it happened before, it's probably going to happen again. So I think a lot of PED usage has been normalized to the extent where I guess in many ways we're starting to see like the associated risk, because it used to be only like the high level competitors that it's like, oh, so and so passed away at age, like 48, and now we're starting to see it everywhere. And sometimes it takes things like that for people to realize that, like, okay, like I am playing with fire here. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next like 5-10 years there was a resurgence of natural bodybuilding, simply because, yeah, the generation that's like almost too young to live now, it's like they're seeing a lot of people who maybe pick that route, and it was short-lived in many ways. Not just like you die worst case, but what also happens is some of those people, they can only lift when they're, and after they've seen themselves like in that sort of shape, they can only bodybuild in that fashion, so they just drop it all together. So I think like every generation is kind of like its own experiment, and I think the generation that's lined up, or maybe even the one afterwards, I think is going to maybe put natural bodybuilding back where it was maybe about like 10 years ago. So I do see it on the rise, but it's unfortunate how we got there. I think kind of going back to um, when I talked about how this was one of the first things that, like, this was just for me. Like, I didn't care if anyone else was into it or not. Like, this was like just for me. Like, I joke about how my early 20s, like everyone else was like out there partying, and like I was up to like 2, 3 in the morning, just reading everything I could about bodybuilding. But it didn't feel like a sacrifice because it was my thing. So I think that's important. That's first, is that like this has to be your thing. This has to be for you. Yes, like the getting praise from others is nice. Um, absolutely. But at the core, like a lot of your inspiration has to be intrinsic. And when it's intrinsic, you're more likely to do things that align with your own values, and you're more likely to stick around for a very, very long time, as opposed to like you trying to do something just for the sake of, like, I guess, impressing other people, feeling accepted, feeling loved, all those things which are perfectly natural to feel, to want, but they can't be too big of a fraction of what motivates you. So I think if you're doing this for you, uh, I think just that alone is going to help you make a lot of good decisions that will keep you in the game for a long, long time.
Yes, sí. Sin duda, un motivo intrínseco hace la diferencia, ¿no? En cualquier etapa que tú estés, en cualquier disciplina que tú ejerzas, el sentido que va más allá de lo mero estético, que incluso yo sé que la estética es importante en el bodybuilder, pero el darle un valor más allá hace totalmente la diferencia. Gracias.
And talking about longevity, another thing that I'm really impressed and I admire a lot, because I know I'm not there, not yet. I heard, well, I know you're training 3 days per week. Is that still the case? And I think that also may have to do, you will tell me more, but may will have to do with this longevity aspect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Still training 3 days a week. Yeah. Yeah, I think when you start lifting, if you are an ambitious, highly motivated lifter, you're just willing to do whatever it takes, So you want to maximize yourself, so you're willing to do that if you need to, and then I'll do that just in case. And if I have to do more, just in case, you just keep doing more. And I think, to start out, that's not a terrible solution. I think that's how we all learn. So you start there, but then eventually it gets to the point where you're, I guess, generating adaptations via a lot of weak signaling, and it can be for a lot of reasons. Like maybe you're doing so much volume that like you're starting to pace yourself, but you don't realize it. Maybe your exercise selection's off, your execution is off. That's kind of what tends to happen with people who just throw everything at once in a situation. So at a certain point, because you're not going to be young forever, you know, I guess the one thing about like the younger folks, it's like they don't understand how hard they are to hurt, you know, until that's no longer the case. So it's in your best interest to, as quickly as possible, try to figure out what is the root cause for your gains, right? It's kind of like the way people would look at food before, like in the Arnold era, like they would look at like, oh, when I cut out milk, I get leaner, you know, but it wasn't necessarily the cutting out the whole milk. It was the fact that milk back then had just normal fat, right? Those more dense in calories. So the same thing with your training. You want to get to the point where it's like you're trying to identify what is moving the needle. And when you identify what those things are, it's quite crazy how little you need. And this is great because yes, the human body's an adaptive machine, but just like say any car part, like there's only so many miles like an elbow, there's only so many reps in a knee, and you want to save those so that you can train progressively as long as possible. And then for everyone, there will come a time where it's like, okay, now you're just controlling the regression. You want to be able to have the slowest regression possible as well. And I think this falls on deaf ears for a lot of young lifters, but I remind them about how good it feels to like do new things, to see new things in their physique, to hit new PRs. And it's like, well, don't you want to do this for more than just like 8, 10 years? Wouldn't it be like interesting and great if you can do this for like 2 decades, 3 decades? And if you enjoy that feeling, I think you would agree that, yeah, like I wanted to be this way for as long as possible. So yeah, condensing what is moving the needle is in your best interest as a lifter.
Y en tu carrera, Alberto, what is the next step for you? ¿Qué sigue? ¿Qué has planeado algo?
Yeah. So I think next year I'm going to compete at some point, probably in the fall. So it's you know how it is with bodybuilding. It looks kind of boring, like to anyone who doesn't truly love it. It's a lot of the same old procedures over and over, and you find ways to make them a little bit better. So this could be the same thing. I'd say if I'm tempted to not use a scale, maybe next time I compete, I think that would be fun because it would make me more in tune with what I'm seeing in the mirror, you know? But also I think the leanest I ever got was 2008. That was my second season. And I haven't touched that level of leanness since. Dietary trauma is a real thing. Like people like, yeah, like, oh yeah, it's funny. It's like, no, it's a real thing. Like it's crazy what playing with people's food will do to their psychology. So even in my case, like I think that prep, while I got really lean, it also taxed me in ways that maybe I wasn't all the way ready for. I'm glad that it happened. I learned a lot, and now I'm here and I can reflect and try to help others with that. But I've yet to touch it, and I think I am finally ready again to fly that close to the sun and do it with an updated physique. So I would like to get leaner than that kid did, and I would like to do it with the added muscle that I've put on. So yeah, that is one that I have to nip in the butt because it's at a certain point, like most people honestly don't get as lean as they want to because there is like a mental block, especially if you know how calories work. You know, it's as easy as like, hey, let's cut some calories, let's add some movement. But it's other things that kind of stop people from usually going there. And most people don't want to come to grips with the fact that they do have a limit, that there is a limit. But see, that limit it's very plastic. Like it's something that you can train, you know, much like all of us when we first started lifting, we weren't hitting our PE10s, you know, like we didn't know how. It made us nervous. It made us scared. It hurt too much. It was scary. And now it's gone to the point where it's like we can take sets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And the same thing goes with fat loss. With as time goes on, your mental game gets stronger and you're able to dig deeper. So that is actually a conversation I have with a lot of my athletes. It's like, okay, I will get you as lean as I think is safe for you right now. It doesn't mean that we're not going to get leaner later, but we got to work within your current capacities, because otherwise you can put yourself in a place where the sport just traumatizes you to the point where not only do you never compete again, but you'll see people who have had these experiences, like they never like are like the body comp that they had before lifting, like even that is like too much for them mentally. So so yeah, I'm ready to continue to take care of myself mentally, but at the same time I also want to test the limits, because that's the fun part.
Bodybuilding is an extreme sport, definitely.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, very much so.
And going back to the coaching aspect, I would really like to know, how do you go about selling this idea of going through a long gaining phase, especially for women? Because in my own experience, but also coaching other women, I think that's the hardest, or at least one of the hardest things to sell. Like, we can be okay with, oh yeah, first month I can have some extra calories. I know I'm training hard, but when you start seeing your body change, and clothes don't fit that well, and also it's really hard to see the improvements in the muscularity, because there's so much fat covering. So that can make many people, I know it has been the case for me, to touch the mini cut button earlier than it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I think it's strange how for most people in our world, like fat loss is um it is like instant gratification, or the closest thing to it, because the general public, they don't know how to induce fat loss at all. Like they haven't the slightest clue. And like once you kind of discover that it's as easy as the basic rules of thermodynamics, it's like it's right there, and like it's very hard to not press the button, as you said. What I like to do is kind of the same way anything gets worked. Like with fat loss exposure, because I always want people to, like, I'm going to push people maybe a little bit harder than they would have on their own, right? That's part of like my job, but it's also my job to keep them safe and control the length of exposure. So just like with fat loss, it's like, okay, you've had a few good 10-week fat loss diets. Let's try 14, let's try 15 for this next one. It's kind of the same thing with like gaining, where it's like, all right, if you can give me, and I usually have to tell them, frame it in this way, because at this point, usually they're at least okay at fat loss. It's like, if you can give me 4 months of you being as focused as you are with your fat loss phase, then we can go into that next cycle. And then over time, I just keep turning that 4 months into 6 months, into 8 months, and kind of they're able to expand how long they can stay focused, how long they can stay objective, and see the purpose to what it is that we're trying to do with this gaining phase. So it kind of works the same way, where it's like you want them to experience it, but you want to get them out before things get a little wild. So usually it is in increments. And it's funny, because if they focus enough on the gaining phase, the way they do with fat loss phases, they soon realize it, like, wow, if being on top of some of those details when I'm going through a fat loss phase works really well, it also works just as well, like the other way is too. And they see the magic there. And then before they know it, they're like, wow, like this weight has never looked this way on me before. Not only that, but I think once you, and this is probably for the people who are a little bit more advanced, who have gained their fair share of muscle, but I think the majority of us to the general public, and even like to our significant others, like we tend to look better when we're in our fluffier state. We just don't like it. Like we forget how good we look once you have a nice little pile of muscle when you are at your top in like body weight. It's just it's all up here.
Great advices.
Alberto, no queremos quitarte también tanto tu tiempo, felicitarte por toda tu carrera, todo lo que has logrado. Como lo decía antes, eres una gran inspiración para muchas personas, hombres y mujeres también, sobre todo nosotras que te vemos entrenar, que seguimos tu cuenta también. ¿Alguna recomendación que quieras hacerle o algún consejo a las chicas que estén queriendo competir, que se interesen por la competencia de bodybuilding?
Man, there's always, I think, it's an asymmetrical sort of rather unfair physiology to work with, I think, when you're working with women, and we have to, like, you have to remember that. But again, this just means that, like, you know, you only need one guy in the village to keep the population going, one happy guy, and that's it, you know? So we lose fat a lot more efficiently, and we tend to hormonally rebound a lot more efficiently. So it's kind of the same conversation I would have if I coached enhanced athletes, where it's like, okay, if you want to go down this route as a woman, like, here's what you have to know. Here's what you have to know. And with natural bodybuilding, even, like, there's just certain health metrics and things that, like, you should, like, be aware of. There's just more moving parts that you need to take care of. And just how Lau said about the whole, how stress impacts your body in all sorts of crazy ways. I think especially with women, if you expose them to too much too early, the consequences can be quite bigger than like with most men. You know, I've seen situations where, you know, women aren't able to get their cycle, even though a lot of the things they did fundamentally right for years afterwards. Like it takes 2-3 years to just feel normal again. So you have to be extra patient in some ways. You have to be extra patient and understand that it's probably best that you expose your body to, you know, some, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, because you guys have so much more to lose potentially in that department. So outside of the, just the standard, like, hey, if you are a woman, you're probably going to need more time to get into whatever shape that is, and that can be the length of the contest prep, the number of like fat loss phases with like gaining or maintaining phases, like to get to your goal. You're just going to have to play that patient game a little bit more. Nevertheless, it's quite crazy what you can train your body and mind to do. So eventually, like seeing Lau's like transformation over the years, it's just crazy. But she's always been very meticulous and patient about her progressions. And the good news is that when you do get to these like landmark physiques, it's like your physique. Like I think if like the way her quads look right now, if she would have got them, I mean, mind you, a lot of the muscles new, but if she would have gotten to like a similar version of that body comp like 6 years ago, like she probably would have been mentally a little bit more screwed up than she is now. So yeah, be real with yourself with like what it is that you can handle. The longer, more scenic route is usually going to be better. And fall in love with training, I think, especially with women, because like that's always my goal with women. Like when it comes to the training aspect, make them fall in love with it. And I like to call it like the grr. Like I think for a lot of guys that comes a little bit easier, right? But once you get a woman to experience that, they're like, holy crap, like this is like, no one had to tell me that's good. No one had to tell me that looked good. No one had to tell me that was beautiful. That just felt amazing to me. And I just want to do this all the time. So yeah, if you fall in love with the training, whatever patient game you might have to play with the other things, it won't be nearly as bad.
Thank you so much for Alberto. And if that's okay with you, I do have a couple of questions left. One is, and it's more like a personal question, but I think many people would benefit from this. But natural bodybuilding can be a really, you can have plenty of competitive years, I think, or at least from what I've seen from you, from Jeff, many other people. Well, I think people really don't know how far they can take their bodybuilding journey and how much improvement they can make even in at their 40s, 50s. I know you have, for example, there's one client you have, I don't quite remember the name right now, is Carrie. She's from Italy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I follow her and I've been talking with her, and it amazes me the physique she has at 44, I think that's her age. Could you talk us more about how you can make that process and that progress last that long and still seeing these changes on your physique over time as a natural athlete?
Oh man. So I think what bottlenecks a lot of athletes, I think first and foremost is just injury. So if you can keep yourself healthy, that's going to help tremendously. But outside of that, I think it's our own ego that kind of gets in the way for like many reasons. I think both younger people and older people are kind of afraid to ask, or once they're kind of set in their beliefs. Like, this is especially something I see with like older folks. They don't want to learn a different way of doing it, you know? So I think it's important that you stay curious so that you can continue to figure out better ways of doing things and be okay with learning from people who maybe they're not inside your camp, maybe they're not inside of your tribe. Because I mean, it's I thought I had it all figured out like somewhere around age 28. It's like I'm like, okay, I think I know how to do this, and this is probably how it's going to more or less be forever. And it never worked out that way. Like for me, it's every year I like to run inventory of what I believed coming into the year, what has changed, and like it's important to me. Like it frustrates me when I can't figure out enough things that like I've really changed my opinion and stance about. So yeah, I think the best way to forge a long career is to do just that. I've had so many athletes that come to me in their 40s where first of all, I'm like, wow, well, applause to you, because like you're asking me, you come to me to change a lot of like the things that like you were doing that brought you some level of success. That's, to me, that's like a huge steal and it's an honor. And this, I guess the same thing, yeah, with the young kids that like think they got it all kind of figured out, because when you start your rate of progression is quite fast and it's quite straightforward. You can do a lot of things not right and you're going to progress. And then it stops working, but they're afraid to kind of come to grips with the fact that maybe they don't know as much as they did. So yeah, if you stay curious, and again, it goes back to like, this has to be your thing. Like if you care, you're going to be out there trying to scavenge, trying to figure out parts. And like, there's no time like now when it comes to information. There's a lot of bad information, absolutely. But is the amount of bad information has increased, like the good information, same thing. It's grown at a proportional rate. So yeah, staying curious and like being able to let go of things that you thought were the only way of doing your bodybuilding, I think is very important to forge a long career.
Thank you so much for that answer, and I think that's gonna inspire plenty of people that maybe are hesitating between starting this competitive side of bodybuilding or not, because it's too late maybe in their minds, but listening to you is probably gonna make plenty of people to change that thought. And the last question I want to ask you, because I would love to have you here for plenty of hours. Sam, that's the same case, I'm sure, but we want to be mindful of your time. I know you're writing a book. How's that going? I know it's a fat loss book or a contest prep book. Any details you can give us of that?
Let's see. So writing is hard. Reading I love. I love. But writing your own book is, especially when it's your first book, it's just like never good enough. It is kind of how that's been going. But it started as a contest prep book because I think that is where most of my skill set resides right now. But eventually I was like, you know what? Like, I'm going to get people who are trying to use this contest prep book to just get lean for the summer. And that's not what I want. So I was like, all right, we're going to have to write it started as two. It's like the contest prep and then like the intermediate fat loss. And then I'm like, shoot, there's some people who shouldn't even be using the systems in the intermediate. So I have to go back and like start with a beginner section that kind of goes over habits. So it started as a contest prep book. And I think that's just one that's going to have to wait, because that one, like for me to put everything I know into paper, like it's just going to have to be so in depth that it's its own animal. But the book I'm writing is an intermediate, and then it has a beginner section for fat loss, all while trying to create athletes that aren't just here for one or two fat losses and gone. Like the way I want to write it is one of those perspectives where like it teaches you better, like you know better. So even if you go off and you do other like things that aren't very sound or thinking or very long-term orientated, at least you know better. It's kind of like those things your parents tell you that, you know, they just stick with you, that you're like, dude, like I don't want to do it, but okay, I can hear my mom talking when I was 15 and okay, you know, so that's how it's going to be written. Like I know a lot of people are going to pick it up and they're going to think it's their one solution and that's it. And that's not how it's going to be. It's going to give you some solutions, but most importantly, it's built in a way where like over time, just how we progress with weights, like that's how it should be. So yeah, it's taking a bit, but I'd like to get it out before my contest prep gets a little too busy and my brain stops working. So hopefully next year.
We'll be expecting that, and for sure be willing to read it and share it. So that's really exciting, and thank you for sharing that information with us. Anything else, Anne, that you want to add? Anything else, you, Berto?
No, nothing comes to mind other than yeah, I guess I think the ongoing topic today is that eventually, like this bodybuilding thing, you want to make it as like when you brush your teeth, like that's all it is. Like it's just a part of your self-care procedures, something that anchors you and makes you a better person, like all around in life. So it's not for quick fixes. It's not to look good for a summer. It's not to impress other people. If you do it right, it's genuinely, you get to partake in all these daily rituals that just remind you to yourself just how important you are. So that's why people should bodybuild.
Well, very, very thank you. Muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. Yo creo que aquí terminamos. ¿Está bien, Lau? ¿Por ti?
Sí.
Sí, para no quitar tanto tiempo y que en algún momento tal vez puedas volver y regresar a lo mejor
Claro
a
sí.
este podcast. Te agradecemos bastante y seguro nuestros escuchas estarán muy agradecidos del episodio del día de hoy. Ya saben, amigos, nos vemos entonces el próximo lunes aquí en Science y Fierros. Bye bye.